Welcome to the Wealth Wisdom, where money has history and knowledge becomes power.
Most people think wars are fought with tanks, missiles, and soldiers. But what if the most decisive battles of the modern age are fought with digits on a screen? What if the true power of nations isn't in their armies, but in the currencies they control? Today, you're going to discover a hidden war that shapes your salary, your savings, the price of your groceries, and the stability of entire governments. Yet almost nobody talks about it. Not on the news, not in school, not even in most economic textbooks. We've been taught that money is neutral, that currencies simply exist to help us buy and sell. That is a lie, because behind closed doors, currencies are weapons. Weapons that can overthrow regimes, collapse economies, trigger revolutions, and decide who becomes a global superpower. This is the story of the invisible currency wars controlling modern geopolitics, a story that begins over a century ago, escalates to today, and now sits on a dangerous edge that could redefine the world you live in. But to understand where this war is heading, we must first uncover where it began. Part 1: Origins. When money became a weapon, the gold standard, a fragile piece before World War I, currencies were anchored to one thing: gold. This meant if your nation issued more currency, you needed real gold to back it. It was strict, cold, mathematically unforgiving. But there was a hidden implication. If your country had more gold, you had more power. So nations began hoarding it, mining it, fighting for it, and slowly, a silent competition began. The first economic shock when World War I erupted. Countries suddenly needed massive spending. Germany, France, Britain, they all printed money far beyond their gold reserves. And this broke the system. By the end of the war, the world's currencies were no longer tied to reality. Some countries lost all value entirely, most famously Germany's Weimar hyperinflation, where prices doubled every few days and children played with stacks of worthless banknotes. The war ended, but a more powerful war, an economic one, had only begun. The United States enters the game. While Europe collapsed, one nation stayed economically intact: the United States. By 1917, the US held more gold than anyone on Earth, and in currency wars, gold meant dominance. The world didn't yet realize it, but a new financial superpower had quietly emerged. Part 2: Rise. Bretton Woods and the Dollar Empire 1944, the conference that rewired the world. As World War II neared its end, 44 nations met in a small town called Bretton Woods. They needed a new system, a way to stabilize global currencies and prevent future chaos. The agreement was simple, but revolutionary. Every currency would peg its value to the US dollar, and the US dollar would be backed by gold. This effectively made the US dollar the anchor of the world. Why? Because by the end of WWII, the US owned 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. In other words, America had the golden gun, and every other nation had to play by its rules. The hidden weapon in the system at first, the Bretton Woods system, seemed peaceful, stable, predictable. But beneath the surface, something dangerous was happening. Because if every nation depended on the US dollar, Then America could print dollars to fund wars, projects, and global influence, and other countries had no choice but to accept them. This was a new form of power, not military power, not political power, but monetary power. A new era of currency warfare was officially born. Part 3. The breaking point, when nations rebelled the dollar flood. By the 1960s, the US was printing enormous amounts of money to fund the Vietnam War, global military bases, domestic programs. Other countries saw this and grew suspicious. Is the US printing more dollars than it has gold to back? So several nations began demanding real gold in exchange for dollars. The pressure grew. France even sent a battleship to collect its gold. And then everything broke. 1971. Nixon pulls the trigger on August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon went on national television and announced, "The United States will suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold." This single announcement killed the global gold standard. Currencies were no longer tied to anything. Money became imaginary. Most people don't realize this, but that moment was the start of modern financial geopolitics. A world where money can be printed at will, exchange rates fluctuate like weapons, currencies rise and fall like stock prices, and without the gold anchor, nations began manipulating their currencies in the shadows, not for stability, but for control. Part 4. The fallout. Currency wars explode. The rise of forex warfare. Once currencies were allowed to float, nations discovered something powerful. If you weaken your currency, your exports become cheaper. If your exports become cheaper, your economy grows faster. Japan used this strategy in the 1980s. China used it aggressively in the 2000s. The US, Europe, and Russia all entered the game as well. It was no longer a secret. Currency manipulation was now a geopolitical tool. The Plaza Accord, a rare admission in 1985. The US, Japan, Germany, France, and the UK met secretly at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Their plan: to force Japan to strengthen its currency because its rapidly growing economy threatened American dominance. They succeeded. Japan's yen skyrocketed. Its export-driven economy crashed. The Japanese lost decade began. A currency adjustment, just a number on a chart, destroyed decades of growth. This was economic warfare in its purest form. Part 5. The new frontline, globalization, China, and the digital age. China's currency shield. From 1995 to 2005, China artificially held its currency at an extremely low level. The results were astonishing. Chinese goods became unbelievably cheap. Manufacturing across the world collapsed. China became the world's factory, and it accumulated trillions in reserves for 20 years. The US accused China of currency manipulation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. China won that round of the currency war. The petrodollar strategy. After the gold standard died, the US created a new foundation for the dollar: oil. It convinced Saudi Arabia and other major producers to sell oil only in dollars. This ensured nations always needed US currency. It was an economic masterstroke, but it also planted a time bomb. Because if oil-producing nations stop using the dollar, the entire global financial system shifts. And today, that shift has begun. Part 6. The present. Modern currency war escalates weaponized sanctions. The United States discovered a terrifying new form of power. If a country relies on the dollar, you can cut it off from the dollar. And without the dollar, a nation's economy collapses. So sanctions became America's primary geopolitical weapon. Iran, Russia, Venezuela, North Korea. Entire countries were economically strangled without a single shot fired. But this had consequences. Because the more the US weaponized the dollar, the more the world searched for alternatives. Russia and China fight back in the 2010s and 2020s. Russia moved large reserves out of dollars. China launched the digital yuan. BRICS nations began exploring a new common currency. Countries like Brazil, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia started trading outside the dollar for the first time in 80 years. The dollar's throne was being challenged. Shocking data in 2001. 73% of global reserves were in US dollars by 2024. This had collapsed to around 55%. The trend is accelerating. This isn't speculation. It's measurable. The world is slowly detaching from the dollar, and that means a new currency war era is already here. Part 7. The failed fixes. Why nobody can stop this central bank sprint, pray, and panic. After the 2008 crisis, central banks tried to stabilize economies by printing unprecedented amounts of money. Then came 2020 pandemic stimulus, zero interest rates, global debt explosions, massive deficits. What was supposed to be temporary became permanent. Now governments depend on printing money just to survive. But here's the secret nobody wants to acknowledge. The more money they print, the more volatile the currency war becomes. Digital currencies, a new battlefield. Countries believe that CBDC's central bank digital currencies will give them more control. But in reality, they introduce new risks: instant sanctions, instant capital freezes, instant currency switches, digital capital flight. If one country's digital currency becomes more attractive, people could move wealth instantly across borders. This could trigger currency collapses faster than anything in history. Part 8. Modern parallels and repeating patterns. There is a disturbing repetition throughout history. A dominant currency rises, it becomes overextended, other nations rebel, a crisis hits. A new currency power emerges. This happened with the Roman denarius, the British pound, the Dutch florin, the Spanish silver real, and today we are watching the same pattern unfold with the US dollar. We've seen excessive printing, global overreach, rising challenges, loss of trust, geopolitical fragmentation. The pattern is not new. The consequences, however, will be unprecedented. Because this time, the battlefield is digital, and the weapons move at the speed of light. Part 9. The future. Where the currency war is heading. Scenario 1. Multipolar currency world. No single currency dominates. Trade becomes fragmented. Exchange rates become chaotic. Geopolitical tensions rise. Scenario 2. A BRICS-backed currency if successful. This could challenge the dollar's dominance in commodities. Scenario 3. Digital currency wars. Nations compete with programmable digital money. This is the most dangerous scenario because digital currencies can be weaponized instantly. Scenario 4. Dollar reasserts dominance. The US tightens monetary policy and maintains its lead. Possible, but less likely each year. We are entering an era where money itself becomes the battlefield, and you are living through the opening stages. 1. Currency wars decide who rules the world. Militaries matter, but currencies decide long-term power. 2. Modern geopolitics is driven by financial architecture, trade routes, alliances, conflicts. They all trace back to currency interests. 3. The next currency war will be faster and more dangerous than any before. Because digital currencies turn economic conflict into a split-second event. Final warning, open-ended thought: the world is approaching a point where one sudden move, a new alliance, a digital currency launch, a major sanction could reshuffle global power overnight. You won't see missiles, you won't hear bombs, but you will feel the shock in your savings, your salary, your cost of living. Because the next world war will not begin on a battlefield. It will begin inside the banking system. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping your wealth, your country, and your future, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay with this channel. Because the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Money isn't just currency, it's power, and the war for that power has only just begun.